Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. I'm delighted to welcome you all in the Risk and Management webinar. My name is Alba Kecha, the Account Manager for Risk and Management in PECB and the organizer of this webinar. Today's topic will be on the implementation of Vendor Sustainability Program Development, which will be presented by David Smart, PECB Certified Trainer and Managing Director of Smart ISO Systems Smart Mentoring. To find out much more and ask your questions related to the topic, today's webinar will cover the following: the start of any enterprise risk management program, the approach to developing a framework that will assist organizations to integrate risk and management into their enterprise-wide risk management systems, and the relationship between the foundations of the risk management framework and their objectives. Before David begins his presentation, I would like to ask the audience to please write down any questions you may have during the webinar in the chat box on your control panel, and we will respond to a few of them at the end and answer to the remaining through email. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the session. David, you may start the presentation.
Thank you very much. Same to everybody. Welcome wherever you are. I hope you enjoy this presentation. So I'm just going to start now. Vendor Sustainability Program Development. First of all, I'm going to quickly just give a little bit of my own background, hopefully not too boring. My ISO experience goes back to the days of 5750, where I was lucky enough to be part of a large project team putting in 5750 into two large manufacturing plants back in 1979. I then registered as a consultant with PERA after being made redundant twice in 3 years, when I set up my own consultancy practice as Smart Quality Systems. Credibility was a problem I had, so I joined a large American consultancy firm working on corporate projects throughout Europe for 3 years, which gave me exposure in Europe and also broader consulting experience apart from quality. I next worked in North America for around 9 years on projects, this time at the other end of the spectrum, were mostly MEs, which again broadened my experience and working in other ISO standards, because I started doing not just quality, I started doing environment, health and safety, information security, and so on. Then in 2008, I came back home to Scotland again and set up my consultancy practice and called it Smart Mentoring to implement my ISO skills. I feel often companies do not fully understand the benefits that ISO systems can bring to the business. They focus far too much on the marketing side. It's sold to them in that way by the sales team, the badge up on the wall mentality, using them as bolt-on systems, and again they want the costings as cheap as they possibly can, so the systems that are developed to their bare minimum. They never look at the bottom line where the savings can be made on improvements in their internal processes by better resource utilization. So these are several ways you can contact me, from LinkedIn to Twitter, etc., etc. Okay, we'll now move on to risk management and say what it is. This definition recognizes that all of us operate in an uncertain world. Whenever we try to achieve an objective, there's always a chance that things will not go according to plan. Every step has an element of risk that needs to be managed, and every outcome is uncertain. Whenever we try to achieve an objective, we don't always get the results we expect. Sometimes you get positive results and sometimes you get negative results, and occasionally we get both. Because of this, we need to reduce uncertainty as much as possible. Uncertainty, or lack of uncertainty, is a state or condition that involves a deficiency of information and leads to inadequate or incomplete knowledge or understanding. In the context of risk management, uncertainty exists whenever the knowledge or understanding of an event, consequence, or likelihood is inadequate or incomplete. We're now looking at attitudes towards risk, or risk appetite. We generally see risk on the negative side, as the following examples demonstrate: health, cancer; the environment, oil spills; cars, injuries. But there is also a positive side to risk, which is taking an opportunity when it is presented to us. Depending on our appetite for risk, you will either be averse to risk and tend to stick within your comfort zone, or be risk-seeking and be willing to come out of your comfort zone, take a chance, believing that the bigger the risk, the larger the reward. Now, as adults, we tend to stick within our comfort zone. When you're dealing with kids, they'll absorb knowledge without any problems. But as you get older, you tend to be resistant and not so open to change or to risk. But there are tremendous opportunities there, and if you're in a business world, then you've got, by definition, you've got to take risks. So now we're going to start linking the risks into the zero defect concept. Zero risk, or ZD, was a management-led program to eliminate defects in the industrial production that enjoyed brief popularity in American industry from 1964 to the early 70s. The quality guru Philip Crosby later incorporated it into his absolutes of management, and it enjoyed a renaissance in the American automotive industry as a performance goal more than a program in the 1990s. Although applicable to any type of industry, has been primarily adopted within supply chains whenever large volumes of components are being purchased. Common items such as nuts and bolts are good examples. As you can see by the examples, its use has now spread to the service industries. In my example, 1, zero tolerance to domestic abuse is used by the social services in this country to help prevent domestic violence. And in the second example, the police use it to cut down on alcohol consumption in public areas. I also saw this as an example when I was over in Vancouver on Canada Day when I was doing Stanley Park, where the notices were up, zero tolerance to alcohol. Oh, sorry, I missed one there. Oh no, I haven't, sorry, my apologies. Now, we're going to look at this worked example, and you'll see that I've deliberately used something that we all know. Everybody uses a bank, and the example is Bank on Us on how they might determine whether their vendors are going to be able to supply the goods and services in need, and to turn supply and in turn supply their services to their customers. The approach I'm taking can be used in any sector just by changing the assessment criteria. So here are the 8 assessment criteria. Now I would say to you this is not academic. This was actually something I did for a Fortune 500 bank in the States. So these, but I mean the criteria could be anything, but they had already developed some stuff themselves, but they felt that it was not, it was too subjective. So what I tried to do was turn subjectivity into objectivity, and I also looked at, for instance, exit strategies, and the methods of exit strategy is all linked into this. So these are the headers were selected by the bank themselves to measure sustainability supply. These headers were then broken down into questions along with the criteria to assess them against. I'm just going to go through them now, one at a time. So header 1, as you can see, was regulatory requirements, and the question was what you can see there, and then there were 5 sources. I've just taken one question to illustrate this method. There can be as many questions as you want. However, I note a caution. Keep your questions to the key ones and not get bogged down with paralysis by analysis syndrome. Again, as I've said, we have 5 sources here where we can get information from. The risk assessment team in the bank would then go on and ask the questions to the vendor and do their own assessment. For example, using the internet to gather their own information. After collating and analysing the data from both sources, the team would allocate numbers in the spreadsheet which calculates the risk exposure number. Let's assume the vendor says that they do an internet trawl and the bank's team come to the conclusion that this method is not effective as the others. Then they will calculate a higher level of risk exposure than if they left the vendor's method, as if they felt the vendor method was more secure. The subsequent control measure or measures will in turn be more stringent than if the team felt comfortable with the vendor's own measures. Header 2. This time there's only 4 sources where you can get the information, and instead of sources I've said frequency, weekly, quarterly, annually, never. If this was a startup session, you would probably need to check them daily, then a bit less after, say, 3 months of trading. Likewise, if the company was going through difficult trading times, then they would check their cash flow accrual and projected calculations. It is important to remember the number one reason for a business failing is cash flow. You could be owed a substantial sum of money from your customers, but could go bust before you're paid. Here there are 6 ways in which a company can develop an exit strategy. Depending on which option is taken, will have major impacts for the bank. Within each option there are subcategories. For example, in option 1, family succession, the subcategories, this is the first, second and third generation who are going to take the business over. Now, depending on how the bank's team assesses the strengths and weaknesses of the family members, will determine how closely they will have to monitor the situation. Next header, business continuity plan. And the first question is, how's your business continuity plan tested? Again, the control measure will depend on how the risk management team view the security of their assets. If, for example, they are outsourcing their customer statements, then a walkthrough would probably not suffice. The bank will have its own IT resource who will probably conduct penetration tests themselves or hire an ethical hacker to do this on their behalf. Header 5, information security. The first question that will need to be asked is, how knowledgeable are the outsourced third party? Organizations are assessing the risks the bank's information is being exposed to. If, for example, it takes an ethical hacker 2 minutes, which is not hard to achieve, then the bank would have to monitor the situation very closely, including whether they wanted to look at a new vendor. Think of the recent breaches you've just seen in the news. For instance, in this country, TalkTalk, I just saw this week on Yahoo, that breach had cost them £60 million, and it could have easily been prevented. Again, next one, reputational risk. Bad news travels faster than good news. We used to say a bad comment will be shared by 10 others. Now the whole world can hear about us in an afternoon. Social media is a very powerful marketing tool. Corporate social responsibility is high on the list of company objectives. Gone are the days when you could say the objective of a company was solely to make money. If we ignore the social responsibilities, an example, don't contaminate water into rivers, we won't be in business long. The next header, service risk. A definition of retention rates will need to be agreed first of all. An example I've taken is a customer who has placed a repeat order with us in the last 6 months. That's one definition. Again, the order size and price might come into the equation. If there are high retention rates, then in general the service levels must be good. The banks are a good example of how we used to trust them and hardly ever change our accounts with them to another bank. However, after the fiasco they've had, then they had to get bailed out. We've all changed our loyalty and trust patterns, and probably will never trust them as much as that again. Marks and Spencer's is another example of complacency. It's very likely they will be recognised as a number one on both choice of clothing and their service levels. And the last header, do you source your products using a fair trade policy? The actual header is country-specific risk, but that's the question associated with it, and you'll see there about some of the measures in there. This again is linked into being a good corporate citizen, not encouraging sweatshops, making sure that all products are obtained from a sustainable source. For example, planting 3 trees for every one that gets chopped down. You only need to think about the Amazon rainforest to think about that, and the slash and burn policies, etc. Also looking at the stability of the country. Is there rampant inflation? Is it a dictatorship? Is terrorism a major issue? We just saw a thing about Somalia on the news, just blown a hole in the aircraft just this week. So we'll now look at one way of doing risk assessment. So you can see the risk assessment table there. There are many ways of doing risk assessments, both qualitative and quantitative. We're going to use the most common method, as it's fairly easy to understand, but it is subjective, depending on the knowledge and experience of the risk assessment team when assessing the risk factors. There are 3 categories for the likelihood occurring, ranging from highly unlikely, and you'll see there it's a 1, to probable at the top, which is a 3, and along the bottom mark says we have a range of consequences of the risk occurring, again ranging from 1, which is slightly harmful, to 3, which is extremely harmful. We'll now calculate the likelihood and consequence score to carry forward to the next table. So as an example, let's take the middle box here, which says you'll see moderate risk, and the way you calculate it is unlikely. If you consider the risk unlikely, then you assess it as a 2, and then if you felt that the consequence would be harmful, 2 times 2 is 4, and same with R1, 2 times 3 for substantial risk, etc., etc. So that's how that first table works very quickly. So we'll now look at the second table. Carrying a score from table 1, this gives us the vertical axis score. We now have to decide the score is when taking the control measures taken into consideration. You will see the traffic light principle being operated here, being used where green is for go, amber is for caution, and red for stop. Depending on where we land on the matrix will determine which action to take to monitor the situation. So we talked about, in the previous table I said moderate to substantial, I talked about 4 and I then talked about 6. Then the measures of control, you can see the first one's control measures embedded in the culture, recognised but not well controlled, and no control measures. So we'll just take 4 times 2 is 8, so therefore in the box with the amber up the top there you'll see review. That's the action to be taken. That's just one simple worked example. Now here's a table here of the measures that you can take. A table suggests possible actions to take on monitoring the risks. Again, using the traffic light principle, excuse me, we can see that there are 2 categories in green, low and tolerable, and 2 categories for red, substantial and intolerable. And then there are no excuse me, sometimes 5 categories are used instead of 3 for the tables, either using words to describe them, for example, 1 in 100 chances of this happening, or expressed as percentages, that is 20% probability of the event happening. So there's a spreadsheet now. Was used for Bank on Us. The text's a little bit small to read, so I'll talk a little on the content and how it is used. There are 3 questions asked in the category regulatory compliance. What method do you use to keep your legislation up to date? How is it ensured that all stakeholders are kept up to date with the legislation? What follow-up actions do you take to ensure legislation is understood? Then categorise the risk methods into high, medium and low, 1, 2, 3, followed by the consequences it would have on the bank. The result is the risk multiplied by the consequence. The next stage is to consider the control measures put in place, ranging from none to recognised or embedded in the organisation, the score being 1 for low risk, i.e. embedded in the organisation, to 4 being high, no control measures in place. The risk exposure number, REN, is then calculated. The final part is to calculate the overall category from adding up the risk exposure numbers for each question, which give us a grand exposure number for the regulatory compliance section of the spreadsheet. The overall score for each category will need to be aggregated and bands introduced to decide whether the vendor stays on the approved suppliers list. Now, what I'm saying there is that the bank would decide a minimum level. Say the total score was 500, just as an example, and say all the bands came to 250. So the concept is with the zero defects is the nearer you are to 0, the less risk exposure there is. So the idea is they might put weighting factors on each band, because maybe an exit strategy would have a much bigger effect on them than failing to meet a regulatory requirement, or vice versa. But that's roughly how it works. Now that's the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for giving me your time today. And the final slide is just other ways of meeting me. So that gives me time now to allow you, if you want anyway, to ask me any questions you like. So I'll hand it back now and we'll take any questions you've got and I'll answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for this excellent webinar. We have some questions here. I will start with the first one. The first question is, what is the difference between risk appetite and risk tolerance?
Well, tolerance, for me, appetite is like you're eating. What's your appetite? How aggressive are you towards it? Whereas tolerance for me tends to say, what are you prepared to put up with? I'm tolerant towards you. I can see your faults, but they don't bother me. Whereas appetite has a, to me, and I think about shares and things like that, how willing are you to take a gamble and go for it, or are you just going to tolerate a moderate income from your share? That's maybe a good way of putting it. Are you going to settle for 2%, put your money in the bank, you'll tolerate that, that's better than nothing, but are you really going to put your money in coffee or something like that, where your risk exposure, your appetite is much higher? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is, who do I involve in risk assessment and when do I need to do that?
Right. First of all, it's important that this is done with a team. Usually, say 3 or 4. You want people that are knowledgeable on the processes. And also, you want to talk about getting the message out there. So to get one, 4 brains are better than one, as an example. So the broader an area you can take the input from by brainstorming, then the better risk assessment you're going to do. And how often they should be done, I often see this as where they're done once and forgotten about. Now, the climate changes all the time. If we think about 9001, the quality management system, they've just introduced a new clause, and the whole thing's when I'm talking about that, I mean context of the organisation. They're talking about a risk-based approach, and they're talking about the risk a business is exposed to and the opportunities that are open to it. Now, obviously, the external climate and internal climate changes all the time. I mean, the government might introduce new legislation. We just need to think about smoking. It used to be acceptable to smoke indoors in cinemas. Now it's social and acceptable to do that. So public opinion changes, drinking driving, other examples. Legislation changes, for instance, new standard for 45,001. People leave companies, the trading conditions change. So that's what they're speaking about when they're talking about risk management. And so therefore, back to the question, I forgot my trend again. The very minimum that you should reassess, especially in large contracts, they tend to get done and forgotten about. But the point I'm talking about here is that the risks and opportunities change over time. So to me, the very minimum that should be done is 6 months, and depending on, you look at, if new legislation comes out, then that would prompt you to reassess your risks and opportunities, or any major, say the MD left in a company or something like that, or you were on a major driving culture change, or trying to be more aggressive to gain more market share, whatever. These would all be ideas that would feed into your risk assessment program and your mitigation, your risk management program. Hopefully that's not been too convoluted. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And the last question for today's session is the following. Can companies just invest in more technology to improve risk assessments?
Yes, I mean, more and more we get into big data now, and that quickly gathers information, collates it, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, there's still got to be the human interface. And a machine's good enough at calculating, and a computer, for instance, or a spreadsheet's excellent at crunching numbers or storing information. But at the end of the day, the risk exposure or risk appetite comes down to your gut feeling. I mean, I remember years ago, I was at a venture capitalist presentation, and something that always struck with me is one of the main things they use is, can this guy deliver what he says he's going to deliver? And they talked about crunching the numbers through computer to X number of points and looking at similar businesses and all the rest of it. But they put significant, two guys with the same business plan could go before a venture capitalist, and if the one can convince him that he can deliver on what he says, then there's a lot of weight put on that. That's my point about human interpretation and your gut feeling and your appetite risk. Back to that again. Thank you.
Thank you again, David, for this highly informative webinar. And I want to thank all the attendees as well who have taken time of their busy schedules to participate. I hope and I'm sure you all have learned something new today and your questions have been answered. This webinar is also recorded and can be found on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to check back on our upcoming webinars on topics of your interest by visiting our website www.pecb.com. Meet you all again at the same date, same time. Looking forward to seeing you all next week. Until then, have a great week. Thank you.
Bye-bye.